The roar of motorcycles shattered the peaceful afternoon as a gang of leather-clad bikers descended on Robert Hale's quiet home. They laughed as they tore through his meticulously kept garden, smashed his flower pots, and pulled the flag from its pole, throwing it into the dirt. Their leader sneered, towering over the porch. "Stay in your rocking chair, old man," he spat. "There's nothing you can do about it." Their arrogance filled the air, each mocking word daring Robert to act. To them, he was just another helpless retiree, too weak to fight back. But Robert didn't flinch. He stood in the doorway, silent, his calm demeanor masking something they couldn't see. Because what the bikers didn't know was that Robert Hale wasn't just a quiet neighbor with a green thumb. He was a man who had spent decades mastering the art of dealing with threats, far bigger ones than them. One phone call was all it took. What followed would leave the bikers stunned, the neighborhood in awe, and the leader of the gang facing the lesson of a lifetime. But let's start from the beginning. Robert Hale, a silver-haired man with calm, sharp eyes, lived a quiet life on the outskirts of a small Montana town. His days were spent tending to his pristine garden, where an American flag proudly waved in the breeze. To the neighbors, he was polite but reserved, a man who didn't seek attention. What they didn't know was that Robert's past held secrets he had no intention of sharing. One sunny Saturday afternoon, the peace of the neighborhood was shattered by the growl of 6 motorcycles. The riders, clad in black leather adorned with skull insignias and the name Hell's Blades, roared down the street, their laughter and taunts echoing off the quiet houses. Their leader, a towering man with a skull tattoo snaking around his neck, spotted the flag in Robert's yard. Smirking, he stopped his bike and motioned for the others to follow. "Hey, old man," he shouted, leaning on the white picket fence. "What's with the flag? You think that's going to protect you from the real world?" Robert, who had been trimming a hedge, looked up calmly but said nothing. The leader sneered. "What's the matter? You too scared to answer?" One of the bikers grabbed a half-empty beer bottle and hurled it at the fence. It shattered, scattering glass and dirt across the flowers. The group howled with laughter as Robert straightened up, wiped his hands, and walked to the porch. "Gentlemen," he said evenly, "you're disrupting the peace. I'd appreciate it if you left." The leader crossed his arms. "And if we don't?" Robert's gaze didn't waver. "Then you'll wish you had." The bikers burst into laughter. "Big words for an old man," the leader jeered. Robert sighed, turned, and went back inside, closing the door behind him. The bikers weren't done. They revved their engines, shouted insults, and stomped through the garden, crushing flowers and knocking over pots. The leader approached the flagpole, yanked the flag down, and tossed it onto the dirt. "Let's see how tough he is without this," he sneered. Inside, Robert watched silently through the window. His calm demeanor never wavered as he picked up his phone. "Samantha," he said quietly, "it's time. Bring the team." The bikers, still outside, laughed and jeered, oblivious to what was coming. As they celebrated their destruction, the faint sound of approaching vehicles and a helicopter broke through the noise. The laughter stopped. A convoy of black SUVs pulled up, doors opening to reveal figures in tactical gear. The leader turned, confused, as a tall man in a suit stepped out and approached Robert's house. "Colonel Hale," the man said, saluting as Robert stepped back onto the porch. The bikers froze. Robert surveyed the scene, his calm gaze locking onto the leader. "I warned you," he said simply. The group was surrounded and detained within minutes, their bravado evaporating as quickly as it had appeared. The leader, now pale, muttered, "Who are you?" Robert gave him a small, cold smile. "Just a retired neighbor who values his peace." The neighborhood watched in awe as the bikers were led away, their motorcycles loaded onto flatbeds. Robert returned to his porch, picked up the dirtied flag, and carefully dusted it off before hoisting it back onto the pole. For the first time in years, the neighbors saw the quiet man in a new light. A man who, despite his unassuming appearance, commanded a respect far greater than they had ever imagined. The next day, the rumble of motorcycles shattered the quiet morning air as the bikers returned, louder and bolder than before. Their leader, towering over the rest with his leather jacket unzipped to reveal a gaudy skull tattoo, parked his bike directly in front of Robert's white picket fence. With a smirk, he swung a baseball bat off his shoulder and gave the fence a loud whack, the wood splintering slightly under the force. "Come on out, old man," he bellowed, his voice carrying down the street. Let's show you what the real world feels like." The others cheered him on, revving their engines and laughing like they owned the place. One biker, a wiry man with a chain looped across his waist, hopped off his bike and stomped into Robert's garden. He kicked over a pot of begonias, scattering soil across the neatly trimmed grass. "Who even grows flowers anymore?" he sneered, grabbing a hedge trimmer from the porch and tossing it into the yard like it was garbage. The chaos escalated. Two bikers began ripping up flower beds, pulling out plants and tossing them around like confetti. Another found a garden gnome and smashed it against the curb. The leader, evidently enjoying the destruction, pointed to the flagpole. "Someone get that down. Let's see how proud he is without it." A burly biker grabbed the pole, yanked the flag free, and threw it onto the dirt. He stomped on it with exaggerated enthusiasm, drawing roars of approval from the others. Inside, neighbors peeked nervously from behind their curtains. A young boy on a bike across the street froze, watching the spectacle with wide eyes before his mother rushed out to pull him inside. The noise stopped abruptly when the screen door creaked open. Robert stepped onto the porch, his expression calm and unreadable, as though he'd simply come out to enjoy the sunshine. The flag, crumpled in the dirt, caught his eye, and he walked over, bending down to pick it up. His movements were deliberate, measured. He dusted off the flag, shaking off the soil before folding it carefully in his hands. "Well," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "I hope you've gotten whatever it is out of your systems." The leader strode up, his bat resting on his shoulder. "Oh, we're just getting started, Grandpa," he sneered. "What are you going to do about it? Lecture us?" Another biker, emboldened, uncapped a bottle of soda and tossed its contents at Robert's shirt. Laughter erupted from the group as the liquid splashed across his flannel, leaving a dark stain. Robert glanced down at the wet spot, then looked back up, his gaze settling on the leader. His voice was quiet, but the steel in it was unmistakable. "You're making a very big mistake," he said evenly. The leader stepped closer, the bat now resting against the porch railing. "Yeah? And who's going to stop us? You?" He gave Robert a rough shove to the chest. Robert didn't stumble. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. "Maybe not me," he said with a faint smile, "but you might want to stick around and see what happens next." The leader laughed, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Big words for a guy whose flowers just got trashed. Robert gave no response, his calm expression unnerving even the most confident biker. As he turned to walk back inside, the distant sound of a helicopter reached their ears. The bikers exchanged confused glances, their bravado faltering. Robert paused in the doorway, glancing back. "You boys might want to clean up before my friends get here." He disappeared inside, leaving the bikers standing amidst the destruction, their earlier confidence beginning to crack as the whirring blades of an approaching helicopter grew louder. On the third day, the roar of motorcycles filled the air once more, louder and more defiant than before. The Hell's Blades had returned, this time with a larger group. 10 bikers now swarmed Robert Hale's front yard, their engines rumbling like thunder, their laughter piercing the tranquil neighborhood. Their leader, skull tattoo glistening under the sun, dismounted and surveyed the house with a smug grin. "All right, boys, let's finish the job. Maybe we'll turn this place into a parking lot." The bikers spread out, wreaking havoc with reckless abandon. One smashed a garden bench with a steel pipe, while another used a spray can to deface the side of Robert's house. Two others overturned flower pots, crushing the carefully planted blooms beneath their boots. On the porch, Robert sat in his rocking chair, watching the destruction unfold with an air of unsettling calm. He sipped a cup of coffee, his expression unreadable. The leader stomped up the steps, glaring at Robert. "What's the matter, old man? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just too scared to do anything about it?" Robert set his cup down on the small table beside him, then reached for his phone. He spoke into it casually, as if ordering lunch. "Hey Sam, I need some support. Bring the team." The leader raised an eyebrow, then burst into laughter. "Support? What, you calling the neighborhood watch?" He gestured to his crew. "Guess we better run, guys. The PTA might show up with cookies." The group erupted in laughter, but their amusement was short-lived. 10 minutes later, the faint thrum of a helicopter echoed in the distance. The bikers paused, exchanging confused glances. The leader looked up, squinting at the sky. "What the—" The sound grew louder, joined by the low rumble of approaching engines. Moments later, a sleek black SUV rolled into view, followed by 3 more. The convoy pulled up smoothly, parking in a tight formation that blocked the street. The bikers froze, their bravado draining as the SUV doors opened in unison. Out stepped men and women in sharp black suits, their movements precise and purposeful. A few were clad in tactical gear, their expressions unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. From the lead SUV, a tall man with a crisp suit and a commanding presence approached Robert, stopping just at the base of the porch steps. Removing his sunglasses, he saluted. "Colonel Hale," he said formally, "we're ready." Robert gave a small nod, then rose from his chair with practiced ease. "Thank you, Agent Maddox. I trust you'll handle this efficiently." The leader of the bikers, now visibly less confident, took a step back. "Wait, what's going on? Who are these guys?" One of the agents, a woman with a no-nonsense expression, stepped forward and addressed him directly. "You've just committed multiple counts of property destruction, harassment, and trespassing. Worse yet, you've targeted a former director of the Central Intelligence Agency." The leader blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Wait, CIA? Him?" He pointed at Robert, who was now calmly dusting off his shirt. The agent continued without a hint of emotion. "And yes, your faces and activities are now in a federal database. I suggest you cooperate." One of the younger bikers muttered, maybe we should leave." "No one's going anywhere," Agent Maddox said firmly, signaling his team. The agents moved with practiced efficiency, surrounding the bikers and securing the area. The leader turned to Robert, his tone desperate. "Look, man, we didn't know, okay? We were just messing around." Robert stepped closer, his calm gaze pinning the man in place. "Messing around, huh? Funny how your attitude changes when you're no longer the one in control." The bikers were handcuffed and led toward the SUVs, their motorcycles confiscated and loaded onto a flatbed truck that had pulled up moments earlier. The neighborhood watched from their windows, a mix of relief and astonishment on their faces. As the leader was escorted past Robert, he turned his head and muttered, "This isn't over." Robert leaned in slightly, his voice low but firm. "It was over the moment you set foot on my property." As the convoy departed, taking the bikers and their wrecked egos with it, Robert returned to his porch. He picked up his coffee, now cold, and took a sip anyway. One of the neighbors, an elderly woman across the street, stepped onto her porch and clapped. Others followed suit, a quiet but heartfelt show of support for the man they now saw in a new light. Robert acknowledged them with a small wave before sitting back down, the faintest smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The flag was back on its pole, swaying gently in the breeze, as if nothing had happened at all. The arrest was swift and precise. The agents moved with professional efficiency, cuffing each biker and loading them into waiting SUVs. Their protests and feeble attempts at bravado were drowned out by the clicks of cameras and the buzz of recording phones. The gathered neighbors, once silent and fearful, now watched with a mixture of amazement and satisfaction. As the last motorcycle was wheeled onto a flatbed truck, one of the younger bikers turned to Robert, his face pale. "We didn't know who you were," he stammered. Robert, standing on his porch with his hands calmly resting on the railing, gave him a level look. "You didn't need to know who I was," he said evenly. "What you should have known is how to treat people with respect." The words, simple but heavy, seemed to linger in the air. By the time the convoy of SUVs drove off, taking the defeated bikers with them, the scene had already gone viral. Videos of the arrests, the tactical precision of the agents, and the unflinching presence of Robert Hale were spreading across social media like wildfire. Comments flooded in. "This guy's a legend. Never judge a book by its cover. The quiet ones are always the most dangerous." Local news crews quickly arrived, eager to catch a glimpse of the man at the center of it all. By now, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, murmuring among themselves about Robert's unexpected identity. "Colonel Hale, is it true you worked for the CIA?" one of the braver neighbors asked. Robert looked at her, his expression calm. "Once upon a time," he replied with a small smile, "but I've been retired for years. Gardening's a lot quieter, usually." The murmuring grew louder as more people gathered, their phones still recording. Finally, Robert stepped forward, his steady presence silencing the crowd. He stood at the edge of his porch, the freshly re-raised American flag fluttering behind him. "Thank you all for your support," he began, his voice carrying easily over the murmurs. "But let me remind you, true strength doesn't come from weapons or motorcycles or making others feel small. True strength comes from respect. Respect for each other, for our community, and for ourselves. The crowd erupted into applause, the sound echoing down the street. Even the reporters, usually more reserved, clapped politely. As the applause died down, a reporter stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Colonel Hale," she asked, "why didn't you reveal your identity earlier? Surely it would have stopped them sooner." Robert chuckled softly, a glimmer of amusement in his sharp eyes. "Respect isn't something you earn by waving a title around," he said. "It's something you carry with you, no matter who you are or what you've done. Either people see it, or they don't." The crowd nodded in agreement, and another round of applause broke out. As the journalists packed up their equipment and the crowd slowly dispersed, a young boy approached Robert, his eyes wide with admiration. "Mr. Hale," he said shyly, "are you a hero?" Robert crouched down to the boy's level, a kind smile on his face. "A hero?" he mused. "I'm just a man who loves his garden and believes in standing up for what's right." The boy grinned, and Robert ruffled his hair before standing back up. The quiet man who once went unnoticed had become a symbol of strength and justice for the town. And as the sun set, casting a golden glow over the restored flag, Robert returned to his porch, picked up his coffee, and sat down. Just a man, his garden, and a story that would be told for years to come.